Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this workshop about video production, which is a part of our Robert Macmillan Symposium in Education. We have two wonderful panelists who will be advising us today, but before we begin, we would like to start with a land acknowledgement. So, we acknowledge that Western University is located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lempanyaku and Chongotel nations on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra treaties of, I forgot the number, sorry, 1796, and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. We would also like to remember everyone that the video competition of our symposium is open until January the 20th. It's a great opportunity to talk about our research and also to learn how to impact society throughout technology. Do not forget to send your videos, which must have up to 3 minutes, to our email, which will be posted on the chat later. If you have any questions, please contact us. We'll be thrilled to respond.
Now let's introduce today's panelists. After their presentations, we will have a Q&A session. So don't forget to write down your questions. Our first panelist, Devan Vanda Boomen, who is our faculty's manager of e-learning and information services. He is also currently enrolled in your faculty's ed program with focus on higher education and educational leadership. Our second panelist is Andrew Graham, communications specialist who also works in our faculty as a communications and community engagement officer. We are really happy to have you both here, and we are very excited about your thoughts and video production. So without further ado, let's begin.
All right. I will share my screen. And thanks for having us. Okay. All right. Is that displaying the way it should? Okay. All right.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So thanks everybody. My name is Devan Vandenboom, and as I was introduced, I'm the manager of e-learning and information services here. So I'm going to be kind of kicking this off, but Andrew and I have sort of combined and joined our forces together to put this presentation together for you to really talk to you about sort of from a broad standpoint, sort of end-to-end video production. So thinking about your scripts, thinking about how you're going to be filming and what you should be thinking about when you're filming, some of the things you need to be doing after the filming is over, and then certainly some of the software that you can use to bring this all together. So just as an introduction for you folks, e-learning and information services, the unit that I'm a part of is the Faculty of Education here at Western University's in-house technology resource center. So what that really is, for those of you who are interested, it's kind of a two-pronged office. The first prong is what I think most folks know us the most for is the IT side. So we're often referred to as the IT office or the IT help desk or the IT people or the fix my computer, it's broken people. But the second prong that we do is a lot of instructional design, educational technology, multimedia production for the faculty's programming. So a lot of our programming here at the Faculty of Education is in an online modality, and that requires sort of various modes of instruction, and a lot of that at times can be related back to video. So we assist our faculty members and certainly students as well with the production of those videos for online instruction and informational purposes. So that's where I'm coming from, and I think as we go through this presentation, that's sort of the angle that I'll be speaking to, and then I'll fling it over to Andrew here so he can talk about, I think, his approach to this type of work.
Thanks, Evan. Yeah, so as was mentioned, my name is Andrew Graham, and I am the Communications and Community Engagement Officer here at the Faculty of Education. So, in terms of what that title means, kind of a lot of different things. So, my job primarily focuses on storytelling, research promotion, and event planning. So, part of what that looks like here at the Faculty of Education is handling all of our social media accounts. We're currently active on Instagram, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. A lot of our content revolves around, promoting events, promoting upcoming events, promoting new research stories, perhaps alumni profiles, and perhaps just sharing tidbits of our researchers in the news, our students in the news, whatever it is that's going on around the Western education community. So I also write a variety of stories for our website, and as I previously mentioned, these can range from things to, keeping up with alumni, seeing the things that they've gone on to do since they graduated, promoting our research, whether it's new findings, whether it's an upcoming study, whether it's something in progress, things of that nature as well too. Also sharing stories about faculty achievements, student achievements, so perhaps recent awards, perhaps some recent recognition, a scholarship, things of that nature, and then also general faculty updates. If we receive a new faculty member, if our dean gets renewed, that was one of our recent stories as well too. Things like that as well. So another part of my role that's not as visible but becomes visible over time is promoting our faculty and our research to media. So a lot of my job consists of working with my colleagues over in Western Communications or working directly with media to promote our researchers, promote our students. So that can be something as simple as, I see a new research paper that comes out and I think, oh, that's something that's really applicable and would work and would really, really do well in media. So I connect with some colleagues, and if it all works out, you'll see it in the news in a few days or a few weeks. So that's something we really focused in on this past year, and our faculty is very, very visible because education really is so applicable to so many different fields. And then I also support events through planning, so ensuring that we have catering for event, ensuring that we have parking, things like that, but also doing photography. Likely you've seen me before taking photos at an event. I've probably photographed you before. I know a lot of folks here I've taken photos of too, so it's always a great way to meet our students. And I'm located just inside the dean's office, room 1001. And I'll mention one more thing too. So part of the reason I'm able to help with a workshop like today. So prior to this role, I worked for about 5 years in news, doing radio reporting, online reporting, and occasional television reporting too. So a lot of those skills still transfer over to my current role, but obviously also translate over to video production, and particularly, taking a lot of information, taking a whole research paper, whatever it is, and bringing it into a concise 3-minute video. So really, really excited to be here, and thanks again for having me.
All right. So let's talk about what a concise 3-minute video kind of starts with. And I wanted to talk a little bit here about what the structure of a script should look like from the perspective of putting together a video that'll be accessible to a general audience. When we think about videos, we want to ensure that we're capturing our audience's attention by relating to them as best as we can. And the best way, in my view, to do that is to obviously start with your purpose and define what you're going to be talking about right from the outset of your video. And that's done through the drafting of your script. And then ensuring during your video that you're staying focused on that topic. It's very easy. And I'm a talker. As people who know me know that I'm a talker. If I don't have a script or I don't have prepared remarks, I tend to stray. And certainly in the medium of a 3-minute video, you don't have that type of time to afford on straying. So writing a script ahead of time is really going to help you stay on track and let you review the things that you need to talk about to ensure that you are continuously circling back to the purpose of the video that you mentioned at the outset of your script. The other tip here that I think is really important is the importance of staying casual. And I don't mean, wearing sweats in a video. I'm talking about being casual in the way that you speak. To me, that just allows you to establish a relationship with your viewer, even though you're not necessarily seeing them and it's not a face-to-face interaction. But by bringing in sort of casual language, I think you create a more accessible space for your audience to relate to you. So I've got an example here, and I'm using myself here because this is an assignment that I did for my own doctoral work, and I think it just kind of gives you an example of what casual looks like in a script. And I've got sort of, I don't know, you can see my cursor if I move it, correct? Yeah. Okay. So I've got sort of the three stages of my video production assignment that I did for this particular course. And it started, of course, with a script. And what you'll see on this slide here is highlighted areas in my script that aren't what you might think of as like formal, grammatically correct English. So it's more of a conversational tone that I'm bringing into the script. And it's weird to write that type of content out when you're writing this sort of thing, especially for folks like us who are used to, academic writing and sort of the structure that takes place in. Um, but bringing in conversational tone into the script then allows you to, when you're filming, and you'll see the script was then transferred into a teleprompter I had set up in my living room. And I will say, for those of you watching who are associated with the Faculty of Education, we do have a teleprompter that can be used. That allowed me to kind of sit there in front of the camera, and there's my handsome face. Okay, I was worried I was wearing the same shirt as I am today, but I'm good. But that allows me to then read the script off the teleprompter, but it doesn't sound as rehearsed and it doesn't sound as scripted because I'm bringing in sort of those verbal placeholders and those things already, so that it sounds like I'm speaking casually. I'm telling you right now, I am not reading off a teleprompter as I'm giving this presentation, but that's the tone, or that's the illusion I almost want to create when I'm doing a scripted video like this, is that I am just speaking openly and casually to the audience. But then, of course, doing so in a written script allows me to ensure that I'm keeping on time, especially if there's time constraints to the video that needs to be produced. So there's sort of a three-stage how the sausage is made when you're putting together an explainer video or an educational video. This is Andrew's slide.
Thank you, Devin. Yeah, and this was just some further script tips that I wanted to share just from my own news experience. So part of my role involved, reading the morning news, reading the afternoon news, and usually I wouldn't see that script until I'm actually on air. So I'm reading it live, things are coming to me. So one of the techniques that we would use is actually, splitting up our sentences, making them super short, and emphasizing those important words by just putting capitals on them. So I shared two examples here, and one thing I'll really stress too is that it's good to kind of experiment and see what works for you. I know some folks that prefer just bullet points and they'll just go from there. Others just they write a start, they write a middle, they write a finish, and they just fill in the gap themselves. But if you do like to do scripting, this is something I highly recommend. So here's two examples. I'll just give you a quick read through. So the first one, if I was newscasting, if I was back in my news days, I would read the first one like, my researcher focuses on how screen time can impact the developing brain. To explore this issue, we gathered data from 200 parents who detailed their children's screen time use between November 2020 and November 2021. We found that parents reported their children spent an average of more than 4 hours per day on screens. This exceeds the Canadian Pediatric Society's recommendation of 2 hours per day for children over 5. So I'm sweating after that. That is so fast, and there's so much information. I don't even know what I just said. But if we were to use my other technique, and if I was reading live, it'd come out something more like this. So my research focuses on screen time and on how screen time can impact the developing brain. To explore this issue, we gathered data from 200 parents who detailed their children's screen time use between November 2020 and November 2021. We found that parents reported their children spent an average of more than 4 hours per day on screens. This exceeds the Canadian Pediatric Society's recommendation of 2 hours per day for children over 5. So again, that was a very quick one, and you can already see like the emphasis is there. You have a better idea of what's important here, what can you kind of forget. So again, screen time use, developing brain, surveying parents, more than 4 hours per day, more than 2 hours per day, like those keywords really stand out to you. So that's something I really recommend, and I found did me so much service when I'm reading the script. And again, sometimes you don't have a lot of times to practice. Memorizing these can be very difficult. I always struggled with memorization. I would never do it because it just would not work for me. So that was something that always helped when I was reading off a teleprompter, or if I just wanted to do, short little bits, record that, do a cut, record another one, do a cut, record another one. So that's my one tip there. But again, when it comes to scripting, there's also the question of, what do you include in the script? What do you include in the video itself? So I'll go over to my next slide here, Devin.
While I'm transitioning here, I'm going to say I loved that newscaster voice. That was great.
Thank you, thank you. I'm a bit rusty. It's been a while, but so for this next one, the one other tip I would give is really find your headline. So Again, if you don't know what to include, think about what's the most important and most relevant aspect of your research, right? Like what's the crux of that research? What's the reason for it existing? What's the reason for carrying it out, right? And that can look like so many different things. But in my time in news and currently in my current role, when I'm writing stories about research or about upcoming studies, whatever it is, abstracts and conclusions are always kind of the easiest place to start because that's where you're going to have your most important information, likely where you'll have your findings, where you'll have how you got there. And really, that's sort of the crux of your research there. So I included some headlines here to kind of show an example. So this first one, again, very, very limited amount of space in the headline itself. So you're trying to get as much as you can in as little as you can. So here we have, new research, the classroom, a game changer, movement in the classroom, a game changer. So this was a research paper regarding children with ADHD, which found that they had performed better in class while moving. Again, it's just an introduction and headlines. Again, you're just teasing the audience. You want to kind of bring them in and get them interested in the story, but you get a sense of how, research can be brought down in such a short amount. So a couple other headlines here too. And again, if you're struggling in terms of finding, what are other people doing? Like that's something I very much recommend is, finding out what other people are doing. So, looking at research news, Western news, or even the Faculty of Education are all good examples where you can find, really lengthy, dense research papers and how they're boiled down into like a little short news article, right? So I very much recommend, finding examples of what works. If you can find another video that exists, I'm more than certain you can of someone, sharing their thesis or sharing their research in 3 minutes or less. I highly recommend that. And, look for what they're including. Like, are they including all the methodology or are they just including the findings? Are they naming, all the references and citations, or are they just naming the research itself? Like what things are being included, what things are being excluded. And again, when it comes to stories, when it comes to headlines, like the toughest part is always cutting. But once you get comfortable with cutting, once you get comfortable with, trusting your audience to kind of fill in the gaps, it really does a lot of wonder there too. So that's something I'd recommend. And again, always huge recommendation is just finding examples. Again, TED Talks are another great examples too. If you can find that, how people brought their information down to that. Obviously, it's a bit longer than 3 minutes, but I highly recommend that too. So, and another slide from me here. This one's more on the performance aspect of doing a video production. So, the thing in news that you'll see like in no other industry is that a lot of like the newsroom when we're about to go on air, people are just warming up their voices and doing like really, really silly things with their mouth because there's muscles in there, right? You're about to do a huge workout. I would be on air for like 4 hours at a time and I needed my voice to be, flexible and movable and all these different things. So my number one tip always before you record, just warm up your voice, and you can do a quick YouTube search of vocal warm-ups. This was the first one I found. It was from the Virginia Tech over in the States. And there's so many different exercises. Like one I always did was touch the roof of my tongue and like move it back and forth. Opening and closing my mouth, like, very silly things. But I found not only was it really helpful in terms of genuinely helping my voice to project more, helping my voice to, really enunciate those words. But there's also a bit of a mental thing that comes with it too, putting yourself in that mode that you're about to present. And this is something I'd also recommend just for presentations in general. If you're just presenting your research at a conference, in a classroom presentation, whatever it is, I really find vocal warm-ups will give you a bit more of a safety net. And sometimes, if you're feeling nervous before it might take your mind off of that and have you more focused on the performance aspect of it itself. Another thing I'd also add is, be sure to project your voice. Well, when I was doing news, I would sometimes record myself, but I'd have very limited equipment, like just an iPhone, and that was it. So not great, not really good microphone setup at all. So I had to keep that in mind and I had to make sure that I was being as loud as possible, not yelling. You don't want to yell at people, but being as loud as I could, just so I know that it's picked up. Because if you record a video and your voice is too quiet, it's really hard to bring that back up. That could take a lot of time, a lot of work. Sometimes the sound won't come out too well either. And that can really affect the video. So highly recommend projecting your voice. And then also speaking clearly, enunciating your words and making sure you're not going too fast. Going too fast was always a huge issue for me when I was doing news. And you end up stumbling on words, you end up getting information out too quickly, you're not emphasizing the right things. And a lot of times information can kind of get jumbled when you're just saying it all at once. If you remember that earlier example where I just said the research paper, like there's no way you'd remember that unless you're really good at listening. But that's just such a tough thing to remember. And enunciating your words as well too, that's another one where, there's obviously a lot of practice that can go into that. Some folks, have been practicing their whole lives to be, broadcasters or whatever too. But one little tip I'll give you is, just focus on the last consonant of a word. So if you're saying something like, I'll read this sentence here, be sure to project your voice, that's very quick. But if I said it like, be sure to project your voice, like you kind of already see the difference there too, right? So it's going to sound exaggerated. It's going to sound a bit weird. Obviously, you wouldn't talk like that in a conversation with your friends or your family. But for video, that's part of what you have to do and part of how the magic happens to make everything work there.
So we've got our script, we've got our warmed up vocal cords. So it's time to think about how we're going to film our video. And the first thing that I think when we're setting up what our shot is going to look like, first thing that I find to be really important is how you're going to frame yourself. What that is called a talking head. So I thought I would give some examples of framing a talking head using the lead singer of the Talking Heads, David Byrne, as some examples here. So you see David Byrne here on in various video interviews, and you'll see what they're really doing when they're framing him in an interview is that they're kind of framing him from just below the shoulder up, right? So we were kind of capturing that shoulder and the head. So it's really just it's a talking head, and then we're keeping a little bit of head space in some of these just above his head with angles. So we're not going face on. We've got sort of an angled body. In these instances, he's obviously speaking to somebody off camera, but it's just providing sort of that frame of that person. And that's the sort of thing you're going to want to take a look at when you're setting up a camera to film yourself. It's not just your face. It's not, you're not just this little speck in a big room or things. You're kind of trying to keep those proportions correct within the camera frame. And it's really good sort of a rule of thumb to kind of look at it from the perspective of your shoulder up, and that would be your talking head. So how do you light a talking head? So there's a few options here. Obviously not everyone's going to have access to lighting rigs and and things like that. The most common sort of talking head lighting system is what's called three-point lighting. So you'll see a diagram of what that looks like here. This yellow circle represents you, obviously, as the person being filmed. There's the camera there, and then you're given three lights. And what those three lights, they all serve different purposes. So the key light here is what is seen as sort of the main light. So this will be sort of the brightest light that's placed on you to illuminate you. And then opposite that is a fill light, which is less bright than a key light, but it's to just kind of flesh out the other side of your body. So you've got sort of those two lights in front of you, and then a third light, the back light, is placed behind you. And what that's really doing is it's kind of creating like illumination like around your body and your head to separate you from the background so that you don't look like you're kind of stuck to the background. It's kind of giving that depth, and that lighting is providing that depth in the video. So like I said, not everybody's got three just random lights hanging around to kind of set this up. So when I think about what would a good equivalent be, or what would appropriate lighting be for a video from a do-it-yourself perspective, we've seen the proliferation of ring lights, especially over the pandemic, as something that really does illuminate sort of the whole face. They're easy to obtain. They're relatively cheap to obtain. Most of them run on USB, so you're either plugging them into your laptop itself or you're plugging them into your phone, and it's being powered by your phone, and they're quite small. So one thing to keep in mind there is, if you don't have three lights, and we do have three lights here at the faculty if you were looking to use them, but if you were looking to do something at home, a ring light would be a suitable option. Now, I believe the next slide, Andrew's going to talk about sort of harnessing the power of nature to light up your way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just continuing on the low budget setup. So again, as I mentioned, I worked in news for about 5 years and I only had one single story where I had a camera person with me. The rest, I just had my iPhone and I had, just me hoping that I could that I could get some good lighting. So if you don't have a camera stand or a tripod or whatever else it is, things like, books, like a reusable water bottle, other similar objects, something just to hold your phone it really works as well. Like I just filmed a video recently for a project I was doing, and I just used this filing cabinet behind me because I was able to stand up in front of it, I could talk in front of it, and I put some banners in the background to make it all work. So yeah, feel free to be creative and have that work. Again, if you don't want to go out and buy a tripod, I know some of them can be expensive. There are other options there. There are alternatives that do work. And the audience won't know, right? The audience won't know. I'd also say, again, if you don't have a lighting rig, if you don't have a lighting setup, if you're not able to make it down to the faculty or whatever else it is, I would say look for sources of natural light. That tends to be a bit better than just our regular fluorescent lights that we have in homes. Most times, if you're filming with the light on, you'll notice you might get like an orange tint or a yellow tint. Sometimes it's not too flattering. You might cast shadows going downward, or it could just not work for whatever it is you're filming. So I would suggest natural light. And with that being said, I'd also suggest, filming during the day, like scheduling your filming for then, can often help a lot because then you can just open a window and then now you have some natural light, or you can go outdoors. I'd also look as well too, speaking about nature, look for where the sun is pointing because there's so many photos, like whether it's in news, wherever it is, you can tell if like the sun's in someone's eye because they're always like squinting, they can't really see, unless you have sunglasses on. Like it never looks too great. So days like today are perfect where it's like sunny, but it's cloudy, so you don't have any like sun directly pointing anywhere. You just get this nice, great source of natural light, so that always works too. And then just lastly, I'd also say, ensure your surroundings are quiet or that all your nearby devices are set to silent, whatever it is. I've had so many experiences in news where I've recorded something, it sounds great, it's my best recording ever, and my phone goes off, or someone walks in and starts yelling at me, or whatever it is. I don't know. But that's just another thing I would also keep in mind. So, whether it's a quiet room in your home or whether it's kind of a more secluded area outside, wherever it is, I would just say, really make sure there's no interruptions coming up, nothing that's going to kind of interrupt your filming, interrupt your mindset going into it, whatever else it is. All those things really do play a big role.
So let's talk about length. Now, I know we're kind of talking about this in the context of these 3-minute videos. So obviously there's some length constraints already placed on you, but I think it's important, especially for us folks who are working in education, and likely this won't be the first time we put a video together, to kind of think about what length needs to look like, whether it's putting together online research presentations or asynchronous video conferences or teaching in an online space. The length of your video is really going to matter. And it's going to matter because our attention spans ain't what they used to be. So I've got a picture of a goldfish here because, and I think this was 2015, this came out, that humans' attention spans, and this was, I think, a study done by Microsoft, humans' attention spans are now 8 seconds long. A goldfish's attention span is 9 seconds long, which means that humans have less of an attention span than a goldfish at this point in time. There are ways to combat this, and we're going to talk about what that looks like. But it's important to kind of keep in mind that the longer your video is, no matter how fantastic it is, you're going to start to see a petering off of attention the longer it gets. So, I've got a study here about a video production and how it affects student engagement. This was an empirical study done for massive open online courses through edX, which is a huge MOOC provider. They took a look at 6.9, almost 7 million video watching sessions through all of their online programming that they were offering, and realized that the median student engagement for their videos was 6 minutes long. So after 6 minutes, you start to see a decrease in sort of educational content being watched and engaged with. And of course, and this might be obvious here, but the shorter the video was, 0 to 3 minutes, hey, 3 minutes, there we go, had the highest student engagement. So in that 0 to 3 minute span is sort of your golden hour, I guess, for getting what you need to say in and explained. Um, as I said, there's ways to combat this, and certainly there's going to be situations where you need to speak for longer than 3 minutes in a video. It's just unfortunately that's what's going to happen. So what do you think about? Well, we've talked about scripting, we've talked about camera angles and lighting. We talked about the importance of putting together scripts that are approachable and that are accessible and that are concise and that always stay on topic. So we've talked about that piece. But then once you've filmed yourself, if you're giving a talking head video, what are you going to do to make that static video look more engaging? So if you're watching this video right now, because we are recording this session, you're hearing Andrew and I talk, but you're also seeing slides happening, right? So you're listening to us and we're talking, but you're also having visual stimulation happen just in the act of slide switching and then us speaking to what those slides look like. So what we're starting to do in this particular video that you're watching right now is we're starting to do some visual storytelling with the use of graphics and with the use of diagrams and so on. And you can do that in any video that you put together, so long as, I guess it's allowed within whatever you're recording to. I don't know, in your particular context if this is possible, but something to keep in mind is that if you're giving a talking head video and you're using those 3 minutes to explain something, you can interject graphics, you can interject animations and diagrams. You'll see here, and I'm just again using this video assignment that I did just as sort of how I did this, is that, yeah, you still see that handsome face of mine on the screen, but you're seeing a text overlay. You're seeing different slides and animations happen to just keep that viewer engaged as much as possible. The other option here, and Andrew probably knows this all too well, is using B-roll. So, I think, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but if Andrew was out filming a news story and he's reporting on the news, he's using B-roll of people walking down the street or a London transit bus going by. If the news is talking about moving people around the city, it's not just him speaking to the camera for the entire news story. So using stock footage or using B-roll can kind of assist with that. Now, one great thing about this and putting sort of animations and transitions and things into a video when you're editing it is that you're actually allowing yourself sort of these natural places to make cuts. So if you're writing or if you're reading or you're rehearsing or you're recording your script or your voiceover and everybody's not going to get it right the first time, you are probably going to flub up and have to retake, or you're going to have to repeat a sentence again. You're starting to create points in time in that recording for you then to put in graphics and animations so that the video doesn't become choppy. So you go, okay, I know I messed up this sentence and I had to say it a couple times before I got it right. I have to cut out that stuff now. But now, like, you can see when my head moves slightly that I've made a cut there. So I'll put in an animation or I'll put in a text overlay so that you don't see where those cuts had taken place in the final product. Andrew, I
And
see you're about to say something.
yeah, I just wanted to interject and also offer a suggestion for B-roll. So if you want to include some B-roll, include some extra visuals, you're not sure what to include. I know it can be a tricky subject, especially, if your research involves human subjects. Obviously, you can't film them whatsoever. So try to look for other things that maybe impact your methodology. We did a recent story that was about this physical activity toolkit that was developed by one of our researchers. And it got picked up by CTV National, so obviously it's a television news outlet. But they needed some visuals to go with it. So what we ended up doing was their producer called me and asked about what we could do. I said, well, it's humans. We can't have them, like, we're not going to show you their faces. But there was, for this toolkit that we developed, or not the toolkit, but for this research we were promoting, there was a desk cycle that was used, and that desk cycle is here at the faculty. So CTV sent a camera person to come down and literally just film my feet on this little desk cycle. So if you see the story, you'll see my feet there and my shoes and everything there. So that's just an example of, kind of being creative and finding B-roll that works. Another thing that I would recommend is, similar to finding those headlines, is I would just find examples of other research stories in the news, particularly in TV news, and just seeing how they're getting B-roll there, how are they making something work. And there's a lot of different ways you can be creative. Like, let's say it's on sustainability. Is there perhaps like a garbage dump that you could film, or recycling trucks or things like that too? Maybe it's about trash or whatever, filming, yourself throwing out trash, things like that as well. If it's about nature, going out in nature or finding trees like that too. So in news, again, we always had to get creative and just try to find a way to make visuals work. Sometimes it wouldn't make sense, sometimes it would. But there's a lot of ways you can be creative. So I just wanted to give that little recommendation there and just say to really, really, go creative with finding that B-roll.
Can I add to that too? Because I'm thinking as well, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong. Um, you know, there's obviously you can go and do your own sort of field recordings for those sorts of things. There's no problem at all. But then obviously there's, I think, an array of sort of royalty-free stock footage that might be applicable that you can grab online for things like, if you needed to film like a going through a walk through the woods, like there are ways to probably obtain royalty-free video clips of that same thing without having to, although everybody should go touch nature as far as I'm concerned. So you should probably just go film it yourself. But that sort of thing, those resources available to you just on the web might be able to fill in some of those gaps. And I would push this even further. And then I just kind of triggered my thoughts here when Andrew was talking about anonymity and the importance of, ensuring that human subjects that might not have given consent to be included in these sorts of things. We've got the ability now from a generative AI standpoint to generate imagery and iconography and things that is anonymous, that is, it's AI, it's artificial. And so that gives you the ability to bring in images of people and things like that to an extent that you've kind of had conjured up for the purposes of your video. So it's another resource, and we're all, as an educational technologist, this is all something we're starting to foray into and understand the constraints and limitations and ethics of the use of these sorts of things. But it is something worth considering and exploring and experimenting with when putting together illustrations and images for video purposes as well. So the big question that everybody wants to know, what is free? So I've divided this in, and there's two categories here. I think there's free recording software, and then there's free editing software. And both can be sometimes the same thing. Sometimes it's better to use two different applications depending on where you are in the video stage. We at the Faculty of Education do have a multimedia lab that does have things like Adobe Premiere and things like Camtasia and screen recording and animation and illustration software here on site. But if you're doing this from home or you're doing this remotely and you're looking just for a free option to throw on your laptop and play around with, tons of options out there. And again, this has all really been sparked by, there's some good things that came out of this pandemic. And I think this would be one of them, is sort of, again, video recording being something that's becoming more accessible just because it's needed in business environments now. So Panopto is a good example. And Microsoft Stream, which I believe is included in our Microsoft 365 license that you have with the institution, along with, of course, Microsoft PowerPoint. So this all allows you to record your face and record and share your screen. And then, of course, Zoom, where some of you may be watching a recorded video of this presentation right now. Zoom itself has the ability for you to just create a session for yourself, hit the record button, and then, record your video. So there are free options to create those, your talking head, just that, some of them are probably on your computer already. From an editing standpoint, so I've divided this into sort of depending on the operating system that you use. So if you're using Windows, Microsoft Clipchamp allows you to take your video files, allow you to splice them, allow you to condense them. It allows you to separate sound. It allows you to put in graphics and animations and transitions and captions. Similarly, the equivalent for Mac users would be iMovie. And I think if you're a Mac user, you've probably opened it up before and clicked around. So they all kind of work the same in that they work in sort of these layered environments where you've got sort of a layer of film, a layer of audio, and then you can put text over top and make your edits that way. And then DaVinci Resolve, which is both for Windows and Mac, is also seen as sort of a leading free editing production suite for this type of work. And you'll see a screenshot there. So just to point it out, like you could see here, we've got this bottom layer here is the sound, and you can see the sound waves of whatever is being discussed in the video. And then you've got, it looks like some the video itself, and then it looks like they make a cut to maybe a secondary shot. And because it sits on top of this one, when it plays, it's this shot that you're actually going to see on the screen when the video is exported. So lots of different options for recording and editing. And quite frankly, the best way to get started with this stuff is to just play around with them. You're not going to break anything. You're probably not going to get it right the first time. But to just experiment, drag and drop videos in, record a silly video yourself and see what you can do with it in these things. I mean, Google is your friend, ChatGPT is your friend when asking questions about, okay, I've got this video inside DaVinci Resolve and I want to make it yellow and sparkly. Like, what are the steps in DaVinci Resolve that I need to do to make that happen? And then just kind of start teaching yourself. If you need assistance with this stuff, come and see us. Like we've got folks on the team that love to play around with this kind of equipment, and we're here to assist when needed. So just some things to think about when looking at the resources that are available to you for recording and editing. And I think that's the last slide. Yes. So I'll stop sharing. And Andrew, is there anything you want to throw in before before we're done here?
No, I'll just add similar to what Devan said too. Yeah, again, like practice is so important when it comes to these sorts of things. And this competition in general, like it's such a great opportunity to really build on so many transferable skills, especially for research promotion and especially for things that you're going to do later, either in your graduate studies or perhaps later in your career after you graduate as well too. So there's just so many transferable skills, and like I'm always so impressed by how, again, researchers can take such complex information and bring it down to just 3 minutes or less. It's really amazing to see. And it's also very important too, right? Because obviously the research you're doing is important, does have a genuine benefit for the world, right? So there's that aspect of it too that I'll make sure to add as well. But yeah, that's about it for me.
Cool.
Okay, then, thank you very much. Your presentation was really helpful to construct videos. I'm sure everyone that is watching either now or on YouTube later is gonna find it really resourceful. We can proceed to the Q&A session. Okay, so does anyone have any questions?
I have some questions. First of all, I think Andrew and Devan's presentation was amazing, and I love your thoughtful ideas about the setup, the lights, and some low-cost setup equipment methods. That's very thoughtful for our participant and further audience. And for me, I was a reporter before, so I was creating videos. So your sharing is very helpful for me. I have two questions. The first one is in the slide, Be Casual. I found the equipment for the script. So I'm very curious about how you set up the equipment about the script. Like it's a hints for you to read and how you set up that equipment. Can you go back to that
Yes,
slide?
yeah, of course. Yeah, let me just pull it back up here. I shouldn't have been so quick to turn off the screen sharing. All right. And I'll find it. Okay. Yeah. Oops. Bear with me here. Do. This one? Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yes.
second picture.
Okay, so this is a teleprompter that we have at the faculty. It's a loanable
Okay.
item. What this is it's basically a mirror that is reading off of, and you can see it down here, an iPad. So this iPad
Okay.
is, I loaded my script into this iPad. It's an iPad app that we have. It basically, on the iPad itself, if you're trying to read it on the iPad, it's all the text in reverse. So that when you lay the iPad down and look at this mirror, you're seeing the properly displayed text. Behind that mirror is my iPhone. So there's a little space behind this box that because I was filming with my iPhone, there's space for my camera to go. So then what happens is that when I'm staring and looking at this script and reading this script, it looks as though I'm looking directly at the camera because the camera's behind it. This text doesn't show up on the camera. It's too close to the camera lens to appear. And then there's two settings that you can use for this. One is to just allow the iPad to auto scroll based on whatever speed you're comfortable with. But it also comes with a remote that you can hold. So in this instance, I had a little remote in my hand as I was reading, and I was just scrolling down as I was going. It takes a little practice to get used to 100%. But what I like about it is that it becomes the obviousness of me reading a script kind of dissipates because you don't see a script, you don't see me looking away, you don't see me looking down.
Yes.
It's a preference for me. I would say, keeping if you're recording, say, on your webcam and you aren't using the faculty's teleprompter, keeping your screen and keeping a script on your screen and you're using your webcam or whatever it is so that you're just trying to maintain as close an eye contact as possible without completely looking as though you're never looking at the camera. Because again, it's all about establishing that connection with the viewer. And I believe eye contact is the best way to do that, and trying to maintain that as best as you can when you are still reading is it takes practice, it takes time. Certainly running through your script a few times before you hit the record button so you're familiar with the concepts that you're talking about and that are coming up is quite important. So you don't need the teleprompter, but you need to have a familiarity with your script so that you are ensuring that you're looking at that webcam, every so often while you're hitting the record button. And I'm sure Andrew has something to say about teleprompters too, as the
Yeah, yeah.
newsman.
Yeah, I was gonna say teleprompters are great, but again, if you can't get your hands on one, or if you if even like setting it up on your laptop is a bit too much, one thing I'd always do is I used to like just sort of write on a piece of paper. I just write a bullet point or something I need to remember, and I just place that behind the camera. Like I just tape that on a wall, tape that on the filing cabinet was what I did recently. Things like that too, just so you have like some visual cues around you to kind of remember. And if you need to look away and look at that thing, look at the script, that could be a point where you put in some B-roll or put in a graphic
Yeah.
to kind of, make those cuts in your video so that again, you're not looking away from the camera, or you're not having any sort of pauses or things like that too. So yeah, again, like there's the teleprompter option, there's low budget options, and if you're creative with it, like you can really kind of make it work any way that you want, right? So that's what I'd recommend as well, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I have another question. Is about when I was creating some news video before, I found that because the major goal for our creating video is what we want to have more audience. So if when we upload our videos to the social media, for example, YouTube or TikTok, these kind of platforms has their own rules to attract the audience, or they find some sensitive topics you're talking about, they will limit the audience for you. So I was wondering if there any advice for our participant and for me to notice when I create videos.
Yeah, yeah. So, in particular with social media, like there's a lot of not necessarily research, but there's a lot of like articles you can find out there about, what impacts the algorithm, kind of like you mentioned there too, right? Like some topics just won't perform well because they're sensitive in nature, or there's something that they might be, trying to hide or whatever it is too. I would also say, consider your audience itself too. So like, for example, I run the social media for the Faculty of Education, and our audience is largely, our current students, our alumni, our researchers, and folks who have a general interest in research, education research in particular, right? So I'm keeping that in mind. I'm keeping in mind that, these are topics they're already interested in. We kind of already have their attention in that way. But from a general standpoint, there are basic rules when it comes to social media. Like people like to see faces, like to see human faces. So if you can, have yourself out there, usually that does help in terms of getting attention. Some of those older, some of those other tips that we mentioned, about having those visuals, those graphics, B-roll, things like that always help too. But yeah, again, when it comes to, trying to get attention on social media or whatever else it is, I would say, don't be afraid to really segment your audience and kind of just focus in on one particular audience, right? Because I love education research. I love that I get to work and read it every day for my job. But obviously, not everyone in the world is as interested in education research as I am, right? But for the folks who are, they're going to care about what you have to say, and they're going to be interested in your research as well, too, right? So one thing to keep in mind is, or one thing I would say to keep in mind is, kind of give a bit of credit to your audience and kind of, you want to hope that they're going to be interested to begin with, and just work from that angle as well too, because sadly we can't get everyone in the world to talk about education research. I wish we could, but those are things I'd say to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you so much.
I also have some questions. I actually have 3 questions about your presentation. So I'm just gonna say the 3 of them, and then I repeat them if you need it afterwards. So to Andrew, I was really curious about your storytelling background. So I would like to know if you have like tips for applying that to scientific videos, because it's a delicate balance between what part is storytelling and what part is outcomes of your research. So how do we manage that? And for Devan, you mentioned AI generated images. I love that idea. I just would like to know, do you think that we should mention that those images in the video were generated by AI, like talk about it or write about it someplace? And also, when you were mentioning free tools for the computer, I thought about the most common one for cell phones, which is CapCut. I was just going to ask if you think that it's a good option as well.
So I'll start with question 1, which was about storytelling outcomes, things of that nature. I would say like storytelling is such a broad term and really does apply to so many things, right? And honestly, like when I see a research paper, like the research itself really is a story. It might not be, directly in your face about it, but there is a story behind, like how did this idea come to fruition? How did this methodology get chosen? How did the methodology play out? What were some of the challenges that came along the way? What were the results there too, right? So I would say, think about it from a bit of I guess, kind of a cinematic, a kind of dramatic standpoint. Like if you wanted to tell a friend about your research, but you wanted to make it very dramatic, you wanted to make it, you're the hero and you're bringing this important work to people, how would you say that? And it sounds silly, but I find that really does help. And that's kind of the way I've always seen things and always seen research papers. Obviously, I'm not writing that, but I do try to find, like where's the point of tension? Like what's the culmination of all this? What is all this working towards as well too? And one thing I think too that's really important to remember, and I think this is something that can be easy to forget if you're doing the research yourself, but it's really important to remember that it's all very important work and it all does have a genuine impact. And you might not see that impact right away, but you may see that impact and years later when it's cited in something else or when it leads to something else or whatever else it is, right? So I think it's really important to just remind yourself that there is a larger, a bigger reason behind all of this work that's happening, right? And that there is something that's bigger than yourself and bigger than the paper itself too, and really trying to hone in on that. So I know it's kind of a longer answer, but I would say, if you're thinking about the story, really try to be creative in the way that you're reading the research paper, in the way that you're digesting the information, in the way that you're thinking about it yourself, and try to shift your mindset. And again, going back to one of my earlier tips, I would really recommend, just reading other news articles about other research papers and seeing how they're packaging it. And if you really have time, I would recommend, reading a news article about a research paper and then reading the research paper itself. I mean, you'll find like so much of it has been either cut out or kind of reworded, or a lot of jargon might not be included that was originally in the research paper. So things like that are great practice, and I think that's good to know, not just for the video competition, but just going forward in your own research. Again, if you want to present at conferences, at events, wherever else it is too. So that'd be my recommendation there for storytelling.
So I'll speak to the AI question. I think that was the next one. So yes, absolutely. I'm a firm believer in generative AI's place in academia, first of all, but I believe it needs to be done responsibly. So if you're including generated content, not like we can have that discussion about your papers and research for one, but any sort of multimedia that you're putting together, when you're bringing in generative AI imagery, 100% you should be disclosing that. At the end of your video, whatever it is, you should be disclosing that those images were generated by Gen AI. But you should also, in my view, be including a copy of the prompt that you used in order for that image to be generated. So when the image comes up, you can put in the bottom, like, the prompt that I gave ChatGPT to generate this was, I need a person standing on a mountain looking at the sun, just so that people understand how the image was created. So yes, to answer that question, 100% yes. Second question, I think, was about phone apps for video editing. Yes, you can use any, like, I mean, my recommendation to folks who are always thinking about, bringing technology into their practice is to use what you're comfortable with. If you're familiar with an app, and it can do some of the things that you want it to do, then that's the app that you should be using. I guess on the flip side, caveat to that is that when you're thinking about video editing using phone apps or tablet apps, you do start to become limited with the amount of control that you have when making those edits. And I mean, just the precision of putting a cut in or dragging something over, adding something in. I mean, I use a phone for a lot of different things, but when it comes to this type of production work, I just find it easier to be using a mouse and a keyboard for that kind of work. If you're a whiz or you've got really tiny thumbs and you're good at that kind of stuff, then I say go for it. If that's what you're comfortable with, do it.
Thank you very much. I think that's it. Do we have more questions, Lee?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, so thank you once more, Andrew and Devan. It was a really great workshop, and I really think it's going to be helpful for our students and participants.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
I'm going to
Thank you
stop
so
recording.
much.